Welcome everyone to our regular monthly webinar for the Gulf Coast Prairie LCC. My name is Cynthia Edwards and I will be your host today. I'm glad to have with us today Dave Diamond from MORAP and Patrick Christ from NatureServe. Dave and Patrick have been principal investigators on the development of the Grassland Decision Support Tool that many of you have no doubt heard about and possibly have been engaged in some of the previous webinars as well as the kickoff workshops that we held in the spring of 2014 across our region. So Dave probably needs no introduction. He's done several of these webinars and worked on multiple projects for us over the last few years of our existence of the GCP. Dave's based at Missouri Resource Assessment Partnership at the University of Missouri in Columbia. And then we've got Patrick Christ with us. Patrick is the Director of Conservation Planning for NatureServe, and he's based in Boulder, Colorado. So the final report for this project was just put up on the website today, so I encourage you to take a look at that, and we're working on getting all the links to the data sets up as well. So with that, Dave, I will turn it over to you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Cynthia. And this is the version for the Gulf Coast Prairie Steering Committee, so it's sort of a high-level overview, and I have about 10 minutes, and Patrick has about 10 minutes, and we'll split it up that way and leave a little time for discussion, hopefully. We initially kicked off this project with meetings, and we keep talking about the Prairie Decision Support Tool, but there really isn't just one decision support tool. I think what we did was we generated some new data sets in support of prairie conservation to be used, and then Patrick will show you a demonstration of a tool that is useful in various types of decision support. So my part of it is to talk about these new data sets that we created that are useful at different resolutions. We developed some for the whole LCC and some that were specific for Oklahoma partners and some that were specific for Texas partners. And some of this is based on the needs of the partners, and also some of it is just based on the fact that we didn't have forever or unlimited funds to do it, so we had to limit what we did. One of the things that we did get done, this has been in the works for a long time and funded by a variety of partners, is vegetation that is fine resolution, both thematically, that's a whole lot of classes, and spatially at 10 meter rather than 30 meter, so nine times better resolution than the National Land Cover Data Set or the landfire data. So we've got a good current vegetation map, and it's uniform across Oklahoma and Texas, and it stretches the length of the LCC. And the area that we have done really is about 11% of the conterminous United States, so it's substantial. And you can do lots of different things with this data set. You can look at the distribution of the extant grasslands, which is done here. You can form prairie patches, which we did here. The darker green are larger patches. And now the hope was that we could help characterize these patches based on other information, including ground-generated information. And if you're looking to generate ground information, you want to limit the area that you have to work in. So we were hoping that this would help limit the areas for collection of ground data to characterize the condition of the grasslands. And we would look for the different types of prairies and the large patches and the different types of prairies. So anyway, it's just something to you can do with the data. And here's another thing. You can look at invasive woody plants within grasslands. And of course, you want to try to manage for those, and you know, they're important for a variety of reasons. So that's some of the stuff we did, Prairie, you know, throughout the LCC. In Oklahoma, partners were particularly interested in the increase in junipers in their state. So we did a new remote sensing data set and looked for evergreen increase, and that is just junipers thickening up. And we just did this within a limited footprint for presentation. Now, we do have the current vegetation map, and we could do this kind of summary too. So we summarize the ruderal, mixed, and juniper by county. And the NRCS provides funding to manage against invasive woody species, and they do that by county. So we could say, well, maybe some of the counties that are darker have more juniper per area, so this is area corrected. And so they might want to increase funding to the counties where there's more of a problem, and that was one of the things that we did in response to the needs of Oklahoma partners. And, you know, also the Oklahoma partners had gone by Duck and Fletcher, which is sort of an ecoregion map, but it's really a vegetation map, and it's very coarse. And so our current vegetation map is a lot finer resolution, so you can get a better idea of what's going on. But local ownerships really do need finer resolution data, and so in response to that, we did a demo using Lidar, which is sort of light and radar. Basically, there's an aerial sensor that sends out laser pulses, and it bounces back to the airplane, and they know where the airplane is, they know where the laser beam came from, and so from that you can identify the ground surface and the tallest surface that the radar bounces off of. So this is kind of a time-intensive thing, so we only did a couple of small areas, actually about 2 counties worth, both in the upper coastal Prairie, or basically Austin and Colorado County, and then down here in Karnes and Wilson County with recent Lidar. And this is sort of what it looks like. The red is taller and the blue is shorter, and you can see that the Lidar is collected at real fine spatial resolution, so you can even see the arches and the bridges based on the returns. So this is really fine resolution data. So you can get a fine resolution digital elevation model, and you know, you could look for highs and lows, you can look for ponds, and this usually comes with the Lidar. So that's with the Lidar delivery, you get a digital elevation model. You usually have to extract your own digital surface model, and from that you can get vegetation height. So you can look at trees and shrubs and the distribution of them. And this isn't just a picture, this is actually a classification, so you can do quantified analyses like what is the percent of shrubs within a given ownership, and you can calculate that kind of stuff. So it's different from an air photo, it's actually a classification at fine resolution. And we looked at a little area that was interesting to people, and that's this small area here. And this is a 30-meter spatial resolution LiDAR-based layer of vegetation height, and you can see these little senderos here that they plow through the brush. This is thought to increase the habitat value for certain species like quail, and this is 30-meter resolution native data. So you can see the difference, how the LiDAR improves your spatial resolution. And when you go to calculate things like the percent of shrub to grass, which may be important for a given species, you can do it a lot better with the 30-meter resolution data from LiDAR than you can from satellite data. And so here's just some properties. You can actually see sort of individual trees out here in the grassland and so on. So you can quantify the area of shrubs, trees, and grass within these properties. And we could extend this. I think the collection of LiDAR is the next big thing that will really help us in terms of modeling species habitat. and it's becoming available across the whole USA and across the whole LCC. And I think that's all I have, so I can pass it now to Patrick, or Blair can pass it to Patrick.
Let me see if that's showing up yet.
Yep, we got it.
Okay, great. All right, thanks everybody. So I won't actually be doing a live demo for folks. I'm just going to do a summary of our part of the project. And this first part is just characterizing these two different categories of decision support tools. So what Dave was showing earlier, we categorized as a static DST, so those would be synthesized data products that are useful for different management questions, and people can view them online, they can import them and bring them into their manual GIS and do other things with them, but they're not going to change them or reanalyze them. Whereas the dynamic DST is the part NatureServe worked on, and this is where we're talking about an actual software tool that people can use interactively to answer their own management questions. They can work at different scales. They can bring in different regional and local data sets, their own data sets, and so on. So hopefully that distinction is fairly clear. As we worked through the workshops about what was desired for this project, we settled on two different types of applications, one being reactive, which is fairly typical, thinking about farm bill programs and other similar kind of conservation programs where somebody brings a site to you, says they want to do something on it, and so the need there is really to determine its relative value for the program, what the needs might be, and overall whether it's a worthwhile project to pursue, whereas the proactive is the direction people are trying to move in increasingly, which is to being able to look at the whole landscape and proactively identify those best places for conservation and then approach landowners there that will lead to a much bigger return on the investment. So I won't step all through this, but basically we created this workflow with, in the light blue boxes, we have our different inputs. The white boxes in the middle are functions of the toolkit. The green circles are outputs of the toolkit, and then the yellow diamond there are these two different decision points, essentially, that would be informed by the toolkit. So in terms of partner engagement on this, we had our information providers that gave us data and expert inputs to parameterize the model. We had a handful of people actually be system users and testers, got hands-on with it, and then other people were what we called passive evaluators who observed the demonstrations and gave input on the utility of it. So we used our NatureServe Vista tool, so just a little bit on that. It's a free extension to Esri's ArcMap software, so the 10.x series. It supports multi-objective planning, but a focus on conservation. It's got integrated help and support and all of that sort of stuff, and it's had over $4 million invested in it by those logos up at the top, and it has a endowment for it that's been able to keep it in release for over 11 years now. So what does it help you do? Usual GIS stuff with that first bullet, incorporating expert knowledge, and then you can define spatial scenarios, so what's going on currently in the landscape, what might be going on in the future, analyzing those scenarios and alternatives for how they support your what we call conservation elements, documenting your decisions, and then supporting adaptive management. So if we look at that graphically, we start off with conservation elements, so typical map of your element distribution, so your habitat, for example, and then values and expert knowledge about those things. If you have a lot of them, which we did not on this project, but you can overlay these things together to get value indices. You can then characterize your scenarios, intersect those things together, and then run a couple different types of cumulative effects models. You get a lot of different evaluation maps and reports out of that. The main tool that was used on this project within the toolkit is the Site Explorer tool, which lets you go into parcel level information, see what's going on, and then actually propose conservation action and get an immediate feedback about the value of doing that. And then not used on this project, but for landscape planning, there's interaction with MarkSand, which is a conservation optimization tool. And then the tool is actually meant to be quite dynamic and support the adaptive management cycle on a routine basis. So jumping into the specifics here, you can see where the project area was, focusing on these two sets of counties in the turquoise color, but the whole boundary, outer boundary there is our project area that was populated. I'll just quickly show you some of the conservation elements included in here. So we had our Blackland and coastal prairie type, all this data coming from Dave. And then the post-oak savanna types that were aggregated together. Potential bobwhite habitat. And that John Hayes helped us essentially create just a little model of extracting this from the vegetation data. And then for Austin County, we had some natural remnant grassland patches. Then we had scenarios. So again, these things that can affect the conservation elements. Don't worry about the grouping here. This is something the tool does automatically. Doesn't necessarily make logical sense why these are together. It's just a GIS thing. So we've got here urbanization and the fire departure, moderate and severe. We've got agriculture, invasive species, and different roads in this map. Mines, railroads, and communication towers. And then we also had a future scenario with a national urban growth model from EPA. So then we evaluate this scenario. One of the cumulative effects models in the tool is what's called the landscape condition model. And so, for example, here's what it generated for Bobwhite based on the current scenario, with red being very, very poor, dark green being very, very good, and then levels in between. And then we took, for the pilot, we had people zoom in to this area around the prairie chicken refuge. They actually could go anywhere they want, but this is what we demoed for them. So these are just some faked up parcels that we put around it. But the idea, you can go in and look at individual parcel content in here. So this is just summarizing condition by parcel, selecting parcels, going into this interface, which looks really complicated. I'm not going to explain all this, but basically it's telling us what's in there and how it's doing, what the different uses and stressors and things are going on in there. And then it gives people the opportunity with this override to decide if they want to propose a conservation action, and then seeing how that action might change the condition up here, so our average condition scores, and see if that can improve condition based on the model. So we got evaluator input. I'm just going to give you the high-level summary. The report's got a lot more detail in it, but we asked these 5 general key questions. There are a few other questions, but basically, installing it, using it, is it capable of providing useful functions and information for the types of decisions you make? And then a concluding recommendation about, should it be propagated to partners now? It shows promise but needs additional development, and people could identify what sort of development it needed, or that it's really not useful and shouldn't be propagated at this time. So the summary, looking across the different comments, was that the tool is capable of generating useful results and could be informing, somebody said, for example, the GRIP decisions if it's fully developed. Again, keep in mind this was just a quick and dirty pilot where we used a lot of national level data in it. So if it was populated with more regional local data and parameterized with local expertise, then it could be helping. People did identify that there are a lot of data deficiencies, in terms of what they're aware of for the data. They're pretty significant, and for characterizing grassland in ways that they use for prioritizing conservation, some people think that's just infeasible, at least currently. So then, if deployed, people also recommended that a local science group parameterize the models, and that we develop some customized guidance in addition to the guidance it already has, so something customized for the region that makes it a lot easier for people to kind of step through graphic examples and then provide training. And that's all I had.
Great, thanks both Dave and Patrick for that overview. We've got a few minutes before we wrap up. Does anyone have any questions for Dave or Patrick? And I just wanted to remind folks who maybe got on the call a little bit late, the final report for this project was just posted on the website. I believe it was earlier today under the Science Projects page. It's a 2014 project, so about halfway down the page, and the final report is included there, and we're working on developing the links to the Conservation Planning Atlas where some of the data sets will be.
Yes, and the Vista project, so the full database is posted for download, and then the Vista software is available for free download. So if anybody wants to actually obtain it and play around with it, they can do that.
Great. Any questions from anyone on the phone? I believe the intent is to highlight some of this work at the upcoming Oklahoma Natural Resources Conference in late February as well. So. Great. Well, if we don't have any questions, and if you do think of something later, don't hesitate to contact me, and I can either get you Dave or Patrick's information, which is should also be available on the website. But let me know if you have any questions, and thanks again to Dave and Patrick and their respective teams for putting this work together. It's one of the first science needs that was identified in the Science Forum back in 2012, so we're glad to see it come to fruition. And with that, we will sign off on the last webinar, I guess, of the 2015 season, and we'll keep everyone posted about upcoming options for webinars as we move into 2016. So,
hey, thank you, Cynthia and Blair.
No problem, Dave.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Dave. Happy holidays, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.